America has been a country for close to 250 years, and in this time has had many issues with other places, people, and races. As Americans, we like to think of ourselves as one of the best countries in the world, a country that only hurts others when we need to defend ourselves. But when we look into our past, is that really true? Think of the African Americans, the ones that we enslaved. Think of the women that we all degraded and classified as invalids for over 100 years. Think of the people of different sexualities that we still target. And think about the Cherokee and other Native American tribes that we killed off, murdered, abused, and chased off of lands that was theirs thousands of years before it was ours. Have we Americans always been as righteous as we like to consider ourselves as now? The Cherokee are a Native American people currently found all across America. They originally settled in the Great Lakes region, but then moved closer to the East Coast, more specifically southern Appalachia, in approximately 8000 BCE. They are one of the 5 largest Native American tribes that settled in the American Southeast. These 5 tribes were also known as the 5 civilized tribes, as coined by the Europeans because all 5 tribes assimilated to more European ways of living. Originally, the Cherokee and the first settlers of America were friendly with each other, trading and helping one another out. But over the years, as a result of more and more immigrants arriving, the settlers needed more space. So they began pushing the Cherokee out of their homes so that they had more land for themselves. Around this time, the relations between the Cherokee and the Euro-Americans began to deteriorate. To the Americans, the Cherokees were all savages, and they acted on this. In 1721, a governor of South Carolina made a treaty with the Cherokee, which created a boundary between the Cherokee and the colonists. Over the years, the Cherokee ceded a total of 49,011,840 acres, which is 76,581 square miles of land, all chunks of area from the states we now know as South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, and North Carolina. The colonists weren't just stealing and taking the land of the Cherokee, they were killing them off as well and enslaving them. But after Andrew Jackson was elected president in 1824, it became federal policy. The Cherokee were targeted for being nomadic savages, even though they had adopted numerous European-style customs. The Cherokee women wore gowns, and they had schools, churches, roads, a system of representational government, and even had their own alphabet. In 1830, the U.S. Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. The Cherokee were treated poorly and unfairly on and off of the record. In one especially notable case, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, the court refused to hear a case about Georgia extending their laws on the Cherokee because they said that the Cherokee did not represent a sovereign nation. In 1832, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cherokee on the same issue in Worcester versus Georgia. In this case, Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that the Cherokee Nation was sovereign, making the removal laws invalid. The Cherokee would have to agree to removal in a treaty. The treaty would then have to be ratified by the Senate. The Treaty of New Etoda, signed by Ridge and the members of the Treaty Party in 1835, gave Jackson the legal document he needed to remove the Cherokee. In 1838, the United States began the removal of the tribes to Oklahoma. The U.S. government moved the tribes from their homelands in the mountain valleys of Appalachian Georgia and the Carolinas, which had some of the most fertile land and best hunting grounds, to western Indian Territory and present-day Oklahoma. In 1838, the U.S. government moved the tribe from their homelands in the mountain valleys of Appalachian Georgia and the Carolinas to western Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. The Trail of Tears was a forced removal of approximately 20,000 Cherokee Indians. The Cherokee called this trail Nunadul Sunyi, meaning the place where they cried, and Tlo Va Sal, or removal. Now, almost 200 years after the awful episode of the Trail of Tears, The Cherokee and other Native American tribes are being repaid for what was done to them years ago. Tribes have limited restrictions from the government and operate with the government as if they were their own state. They don't need to pay certain taxes and have the same rights as someone from any other race. All the Cherokee wanted was to be able to govern themselves without having the U.S. make them move from place to place. Even with what the government has given them now, they still have some issues with the way things are run. Some Cherokee feel like they should be treated more fairly by the government, like instead of having to deal with the Bureau of Indian Affairs with problems concerning relations, they should deal with the Secretary of State like other sovereign nations. All the Cherokee really wanted was to be able to govern themselves without having the U.S. make them move from place to place. Even with what the government has given them now, they still have some issues with the way things are run. Some Cherokee feel like they should be treated more fairly by the government, like instead of having to deal with the Bureau of Indian Investigations, they should be able to deal with the Secretary of State like other sovereign nations. The Cherokee are recognized as having tribal sovereignty, which is the authority of indigenous tribes to govern themselves within the borders of the United States of America. A possible solution to all this isn't much different from what is already being done. Although since the tribes had the land in southern Appalachia, which included the Carolinas, Georgia, Virginia, and West Virginia, taken from them, reserves and areas should be cleared up so that the Cherokee and even other tribes have a right to take back the land that was originally theirs. The only potential problem with this is that there are already people living there that most likely wouldn't want to move. However, there are areas of land that are being sold, which the government could buy and give to the Cherokee and other tribes. The Cherokee are already almost treated like their own state and have many liberties that other places do not. The United States government is doing their best to make up for the trouble they caused the Cherokee before, and the government themselves don't really want anything except to make sure that the Cherokee and the other tribes are happy with what they have. The Cherokee in America might have had huge problems in the past, but now, as long as things keep going smoothly, only small changes need to be made for the peace to be kept. The Cherokee are safe.